Good morning, everyone. This is the Mount Pleasant Waterworks Tropical update for Hurricane Irma. It is Monday, September 11th, approximately 9:15 a.m. So, quick update this morning on what's going on with Irma. Here is the 8 a.m. Position update, and from this point is the 5 a.m. forecast track. It's continuing to play along pretty nicely, stay in line basically with the forecast. Mount Pleasant is inside the estimated tropical storm force wind field represented by the yellow circle here. And offshore over the open water, there in most areas there are sustained tropical storm force winds of 39 miles per hour or greater. As we've discussed several times, once that wind moves over land, it's a bit of a different story. So we are not seeing sustained tropical storm force winds, but definitely there are gusts of tropical storm force in the Mount Pleasant Charleston area. So I will get rid of that and show you the estimated wind speeds based on those wind fields. So offshore of Mount Pleasant, winds probably in the mid 40 mile per hour range. Once the winds move over land and away from the immediate beaches, it's more like in the 20s, possibly up to 30 or so. I have seen a few gusts reported right along the immediate coast or buoys just offshore of 40 to 45 or so miles per hour. So these numbers appear to be pretty much in line, as these do as well. I'm seeing from inland reporting stations in the 25 to 30 mile an hour range. So looks like all that's lining up pretty well. We'll look at an animation here of the wind speeds based on the forecast. So we'll kind of just move through this and let you see how that plays out. The wind field is already beginning to collapse and shrink as the storm is weakening. This is midnight. I'm sorry, that was noon. 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m. And it's pretty much moving away from us. And as far as a tropical cyclone, it pretty much ceases to exist late tonight, early tomorrow morning. Again, as we've mentioned before, it's going to be breezy and gusty all through the southeast associated with the remnants of this, but the tropical cyclone itself has pretty much done with at that point. Last thing I want to show you in here is the current risk impact analysis for Mount Pleasant. And not a lot of changes. Still basically saying we could be in the 25 to possibly 30, 35 mile per hour as kind of the more common, and this is probably more common to be gusts than sustained winds. And some higher gusts are going to be possible. And as I've said, some of the buoys and immediately along the coast, I have seen reports overnight and this morning of 40 to 45 miles per hour, maybe a few a little bit higher than that on buoys offshore. But I think for the Mount Pleasant area, the 25 to 35 gusts should be pretty close, with occasional gusts still higher, and that really should be dropping off slowly throughout the day today and into tonight. But it'll be kind of slow as it moves away. The heavier gusts will be in the rain bands as those come on shore, and we'll take a look at that here in just a second. Few other things I wanted to look at here is the wind forecast from the National Weather Service Charleston office. So they're taking the Hurricane Center forecast and other larger scale weather forecasts and sort of boiling that down to the Charleston area and specific impacts. And that forecast shows 40 mile per hour winds through right now, this current period. Little peak around 2 to 3 p.m. of maybe mid 40s. And again, these are more likely to be gusts than sustained winds. possibly sustained winds this high just offshore over the open water. And they're talking to people on barrier islands. This forecast is for people on barrier islands and immediately along the beaches, so they have to be on the kind of on the reasonable worst case side. I don't expect Mount Pleasant to see 40-mile-an-hour sustained winds. Um, Gusts possibly. So kind of infer that. And here's the worst case scenario. Here are their worst case gusts. So 50s, mid 50s or so possible. More likely to be beaches and immediately offshore. So that's kind of a local flavor of the forecast, which is pretty much in line with the other sources that I'm using. Rainfall. The current rainfall forecast still has Mount Pleasant in the 4 to 6 inch range. That's very hard to forecast exactly who's going to get what in these things. It really just depends on where those rain bands set up and how they move in. And that is most likely, if we see any gusts higher than 25, 35, they will probably be associated with rain bands and squall lines. So here's the current radar. There is a lot of heavy rain in front of the system, some off to the east and north. But we seem to be, at least for now, we're kind of right on the fringe of all of this. Seems to be that the heaviest rain is going to be south of Charleston, but it just depends on how the structure of this part of the storm, how it does through the day. If some of this swings out a little wider, we could get a little more rain, and there will be higher gusts of wind in these thunderstorms and in these heavy rain bands if we experience them. We stay right on the edge of all this. Our rain could be rather minimal, and the wind we see could be no worse than you've already seen up until this point. So that's it for this morning. Just wanted to give you a quick update of where we stand and what today probably looks like. So that is it. Probably I may do one other update tomorrow, but may not even do that. And if I do, that will be the end of it. So thank goodness we're pretty much done with Irma once we get through today. We were very fortunate that the track decided to shift. Florida was very fortunate. Some areas more than others, but given the what we were facing of a potential Category 4, Category 5 making landfall, at least it did weaken. The structure of the storm changed a little bit as it started to pull in some dry air. And Florida, even the areas that took the hardest hit from Irma, we're still fortunate because it could have been much, much worse. So this is a good lesson learned that these things that they're not predictable 100%. The National Hurricane Service does a fantastic job, but they just can't predict exactly what these things are going to do or where they're going to go. So that's why we do all these things we do. So that's it for today. May have another update tomorrow. You guys stay safe out there, and we will talk to you later.